Hi everyone, and welcome to another episode of Melissa's Tabletop Talk. Today I have with me Yian Huang, the founder of the podcast The Intimate Moment. And we're here to find out more about his podcast, why he started it, and what is it all about. So Yian, welcome to my little tabletop talk. And yes, tell me more about your intimate moment.
Melissa, thank you so much for having me on your show. Yes, I would love to tell you more about my intimate moment, the podcast.
Just to keep it PG-13, right?
Yes, right. So I started it early this year, just before COVID, and it's all about human connection. So something that I ironically feel I'm very bad at. I feel I am very bad at connecting to people and that I've got low EQ, don't listen very well. And so I started this podcast as a way of just learn. It's basically to learn for myself, right? To interview people who are good at these things, have them on my show, and then I get better at them. And of course, I've done maybe 60 or 70 so far. And of course, as I do them, I get better. But actually, the most important thing I found is that I actually not only I am very good at it, but I have been all this time. I have been very good at these things already. It's just getting the confidence more that I actually accept that I'm okay. I don't have to be perfect, and that being okay is good enough, and I'm quite good at them.
You know, I was about to tell you that I don't believe you when you said that you have low EQ and you don't know how to connect with people, because just for the viewers, we connected during a workshop that I held during the Sugar and Spice Festival. And yeah, Yan connected really well with his partner who was thrown with him to do the workshop, as well as, you know, when I was hopping into each discussion group, and you know, the way he told me and the whole group about what happened during the workshop, which I shan't go into details because that would be another video altogether. But yeah, you connect very well with people. And after that, you surprised me with your birthday podcast thing. And you invited so many people who were telling you that, hey, you know, you are a great person, you connect well with all of us, and that's why we were on your birthday podcast.
See, it's actually really funny. And I know you sort of half mentioned that you didn't really want to go into your workshop, right? And of course, we've already talked about your workshop on my podcast when I interviewed you. But just as we are speaking now, I feel it's a bit relevant to bring up, because the big transformation, the big sort of transcendent moment I had in your workshop was I realized that I already am something that I feel that I'm not, right? And that was in your workshop. Your workshop was about body image, and I have this, I mean, as a guy, I don't think I have body image issues, but then I went into it and I was like, actually God, and the thing that I'm most sensitive about my body, the other person already sees that I already have this thing, and it's unprompted as well. That was the stunning part of it. Same thing for connection, right?
Yep.
I have this like feeling that, I'm not very good at connection. And I say it so many times. Then people like you will say like, don't bluff lah. How can you be bad at connection? And I suppose after enough times of people saying it to me, then I'm like, actually, I'm not so bad. I'm quite good.
Yeah. Doesn't it remind you a little bit of like the Wizard of Oz, you know, like right at the end, the last chapter, then, you know, Glenda said to all of them, like, you've always had it in you.
I am not familiar with the details of the story, but that sounds wonderful. Yes, that we've always had.
Never read Wizard of Oz?
I know he went down. I think it's not Kansas anymore, but I don't know the whole storyline. But of course, that's absolutely correct. That at the end of the day, I should go read the story now. Of course, at the end of the day, it's always been in us. It's actually really interesting that phrase comes up in meditation or mindfulness. Mindfulness is now this big thing that's going on, right? Everyone's doing mindful meditation. And one of the things we always tell each other or ourselves in mindfulness is that everything that we're seeking out there, we already have within us.
That's very profound. And yeah, it sounds like an intimate moment too. you've interviewed so many people already, and you've called it the intimate moment. And now that you found out that you always had it in you, in that sense, right? What do you aim to do with your podcast then?
I would say that now that I've found that it's entirely and always within me, of course, I don't really believe it. Right? So I half get the insight, and I suspect it'll take me a long time more to really, truly believe it and live it.
Mm,
So the first is, I think, the self-improvement part, the discovery. That part I feel will never end. I feel it's a
mm,
lifelong process.
yeah.
And the podcast is a fantastic format for me to do that, because
Mm,
I get to indulge my curiosity. I get to ask people. I get to spend time with people.
yeah.
And that part I love. Of course, the second part is that if I learn something, please try not to learn it for myself and try and share it with everybody else,
Mm,
So people who follow along the podcast, hopefully they follow along the journey as well.
mm.
And we all get to somewhere together. We're all going to the same place anyway. So
So, what have you learned so far? I mean, after interviewing 70 people, besides the fact that you are great at connecting with others, like
yeah.
what other little nuggets of wisdom have you like received?
So the first set that I can think of is the practical nuggets. Okay.
Mm,
And these are technical tips. This is the first thing that I ask people about.
mm,
Oh, you're a dance instructor. How do you teach your students to connect with each other?
mm,
Okay, you're a nurse. How were you trained to provide? I don't know what they call it. Like touch therapy to the patients. Okay, how do you hold the grandma's hand in a
mm,
way that makes her feel comforted? Right.
mm,
So these are physical techniques. Okay.
mm,
Mark Nicholson is the founder of 1880, the social club. How do you bring your members together? He had a wonderful story from his past about how his dad has hosted 2,000 meetings at his house every Wednesday without fail for the last like 40 years. Every Wednesday, he brings he fills his whole house full of people and has like a salon basically. So stories like that just really, really inspire me. And they're all tips, and everybody that I interview has some way of connecting to people that I like to explore and get tips. So this is one set. Okay, there's plenty of these practical tips. I mentioned two or three. Theoretically, there should be 70 of them now, because every podcast I go, the first 20 minutes is usually what I call the professional side. How do you do your job? How do you bring people together? Then the second part of the podcast is where I try and get a bit personal and intimate. So I say,
mm,
hey, you take your tips that you've just shared with me. How do you apply it to your own life?
mm,
So not your professional life, but look, if you know how to, let's say, dance, right? You know how to do lead and follow. You know how to co-create rather than tell someone what to do, right? How does that work in your own personal relationship with your spouse, or with your children, or with, I don't know, who very contentious, right? Parents or parents-in-law, always very contentious one, right? So how do you connect better to the people that are closest and matter most? Then the third set, I would say, is the self, right? What we open up this conversation with. It's the final because it's also the most obscure and the hardest to access. It's very easy to talk about physical things.
mm,
It's also quite easy to talk about interpersonal relationship, because everybody can relate to that, right? It's only whether they want to share. If they want to share, it's easy to talk about and easy to relate to.
mm,
Connecting to the self, I find is far more obscure. People, I don't want to do it. I don't want to open the box. I don't want to see that it's actually all my fault. you know, everything I have is within me is powerful and scary, right? Because on the one hand, it means on the one hand, everything is within my control. So that's the power, right? But on the other hand, everything has been within my control the whole time. So if anything didn't work in my life, it's
mm.
really my fault and nobody else's, right?
Yeah, and sometimes like putting a mirror up against yourself and
Mm,
seeing everything, yeah, it's scary because
very
I mean I
scary.
mentioned this during my workshop as well. We also have a tendency of just picking out on all our flaws and
Mm,
just focusing on them on a microscopic level as well. When we do look at our flaws, And we are so obsessed over our flaws sometimes that we forget to see the good part, right?
Sure.
And yeah, so that's why when you said that sometimes it's okay to just be okay, you don't have to be the best at it, right? Yeah, so I thought that that was a good thing that I learned so far from you. You said that you did learn some practical things as well. So what other practical things have you learned, and you are trying to actively apply in your life right now?
I think one of the most important ones for me is dance, and it's the reason is it's because it's between two people.
Mm,
One person presumptively gets to lead, usually the guy, and I like to lead. Right. So I would say that growing up,
mm,
doing really well in the army, for example, I have a leadership style that's very authoritarian based, a bit macho, a bit overly masculine, or what
mm,
do you call it when it's a bit, what do you call it, chauvinistic, right? I have a
mm.
bit of this sort of patriarchal view of the world where
Yeah.
somebody has to be in charge, and between the man and the wife, it might as well be the man. Right? And I don't think this is just because I'm the man, right? I have daughters as well, and I do feel that in some sense, when they get married,
Yeah.
when it comes down to 50-50, that final decision, someone needs to have the casting vote. And I feel that at some point, I would like to raise my daughters to find a man that they don't mind deferring to. Okay.
Interesting.
Yeah. Because I think the worst is 50-50. 50-50, then everything gets bogged down. Because of course it works great when it works, right? But when it doesn't work, then the thing can't move, you see.
Okay.
Right?
But I'm going to challenge you on that idea later. But
Yes.
yes,
Yeah.
please.
Don't worry. So of course, I was happy to hear your challenge, and of course,
Yeah.
dance is one of the big
Mm,
challenges of that, because in the
mm,
past, dance used to be very much one lead, one follow. Okay, man
mm.
lead, woman
Yes.
follow, no choice.
Yeah.
But more and more now, as I delve into it, it becomes very clear that that's not the case at all. In tango, for example, this is traditional. Nowadays, very hard to implement. Used to be Men used to be obliged to dance with men for a year before they can get to lead. So they have to be follows first, okay, in the traditional Buenos Aires world, okay, of tango.
Interesting.
Yeah. Brazilian Zouk right now is all about co-creation. So it's all about 50-50. Like, yes, the guy gets to suggest the moves, but the girl gets to decide whether she wants to follow them or not, or how
Mm,
far she wants to go in each of the moves. So it's a lot about co-creation. A lot of this term comes up a lot nowadays. Kizomba, I learned follow the follow. So the man can initiate the move, then watch the follow as she does it, and then you follow her into the move. Right? So there's a lot of these concepts that are coming out nowadays. A lot of partner dance for me is very good because it's very structured. Okay, I like a bit of structure in human interaction. Again, because I think I'm not so good at it, I like structure. This is a very structured conversation, which I love. Right? We take turns to speak. Zoom can't handle two people speaking at the same time. Not that we can either, but in groups, people speak over each other a lot, right? And I
true.
like this. So partner dance, a lot of the instructors, in fact, most of them will emphasize that it's not the guy that gets to force the girl to do everything he wants, right? There's a lot of care and concern for the other party. And of course, I like the dance itself, right? But I take all of these principles and I go and apply them to my own life,
Mm,
right? So when I go to my wife and I'm like, oh, this is what you mean by 50-50. Oh, you want to co-create something together. Then I'm like, oh, okay, like that, right? You want to have sushi, I want to have Mexican food, right? Who gets to decide? We can either fight about it or one time this time, or we can actually have a conversation about what we like. So it's the same with dance, right? One wants to dance fast, one wants to dance slow. When we hear particular music, one wants to dance to the melody, which is very flowy, and one wants to dance to the staccato of the drum, right?
mm.
Who gets to decide? Right? Traditionally, it's the guy, right? If I dance this, you follow, right? But nowadays, it's more like, as I watch you respond, let's say I want to dance to the beat, okay? You're dancing to the flow. As I dance with the beat, and I find that actually you're not quite following me, right? But then every now and then when I give a bit of space, I see you flowing. Then I'm like, okay, I better follow your style and lead the things that you like to do, right? So it's the same thing now. That I apply to my same thing that I apply to my personal life as well.
So has that improved your relationship with your wife and maybe other people around you?
Yeah, so for sure, the ones that improve the most are the wife. Absolutely, yes. It's listening, right? It's, we keep getting told to listen and listen. And of course, when people tell it, it's like, half goes in and half doesn't go in. And this is just another part of my life that people tell the teachers, right, instructors tell the leader to listen to the follow. It's not the follow listen to you, it's the leader listen to the follow, right?
And that brings up a excellent point because in the past, in interviews, I remember when I was a fresh graduate, and then a very popular interview question would be, what is your definition of a leader? And my answer has always been, a great leader knows when to be in front, leading the whole team, being in the middle, being part of the group, and being at the back, pushing people. And that has got to do with different modes, because everybody thinks the leader means always in front, pulling people, like telling people what to do, etc. But that's not always the case. And I do see that being applied in a lot of things that's happening around on our world, when followers are like, we are giving up this so-called power to the leaders because we have certain expectations. But when those expectations are not met, then that's when the followers will have a protest or uprising in that sense and say that, you know what, you have failed somewhat as a leader, we need you to improve. But if the leader doesn't listen to the followers, then he or she is going to get knocked down as a leader. And that's why I also was saying that I would challenge, your idea just now when you said that you would like your daughters to find a man that they can defer to, because I do see relationships as being 50-50, but 50-50 not in a sense of decision making. 50-50 in a sense that we have equal power, equal decision making skills, but it depends on the context, the situation. One will lead in situation A, the other will lead in situation B, because it really depends again on the situation. It also depends on your skill sets, right? So, for example, like I'm sure you can find more examples because you're actually married. Like, for example, you mentioned about the sushi or Mexican, right? But if if the wife is the one who is cooking, right? And if she says like, I don't know how to do Mexican, then you're like, okay, fine, we'll eat whatever you cook today, and then the next day we'll have takeout or something like that, right? So it's not like a differing or giving up of power. But I do feel like it is important that and this I talked with Martha as well, about this whole power thing, sexuality, because you mentioned masculinity. Masculinity and leadership always somehow seems to go together. And for us women, that came to me extremely strong as a message when I started, like, not even working, even before that, right? When I was put in leadership roles to get the class to do stuff and all of that. And I had no issues when I was in all-girls school. But when I went to JC, and then I was like the co-class rep, and I had to tell the class things to do, the boys started telling me that, hey, can you stop being so bossy?
Yeah.
Right? And
this
to
is
me,
the
I was
very
like,
unfortunate thing in our society, right? When women start to lead, they are seen as bossy. When men start to lead, oh, it's great, he's a natural leader,
Exactly.
Very tough.
Yeah, so that kind of carried on as well in my working world when yeah, again the same kind of feedback, but I did not have that kind of feedback when in my first job and all the whole team was just type A personality, you know. Um I mean I was working in finance, so you can imagine type A personality,
Mm.
very strong, go-getter. If you're passive, you'll be eaten alive kind. So they actually appreciated me not being passive, the not so feminine part in that sense when it comes to work, right? But then when I did move on to a local brokerage, then yeah, I started to hear the same terms again, like, you know, bossy. Yeah, for whatever reason, they didn't really appreciate the way that I was leading things.
Yep.
And like you, I found that I was a bit authoritative. When I run events, I will plan it down to the minute. I'll plan it
Mm.
down to everybody, and everybody listen to me. You know, I have a job for you.
Mm.
Yeah, and it runs like clockwork. So nobody will complain about my events because it runs very smoothly. But behind my back, maybe they're just not very happy because I'm not chillax enough, right? But yeah, after a while,
How can you be chillax but efficient at the same time? Because I totally get what you're doing, right? When you want to be efficient, the thing has to run on clockwork. Otherwise, you run a very slack event now, right?
mm,
That's the trade-off, right? You want to run slack event, go ahead. Then you get half the number of things done. How can you be efficient while giving off an impression of chillax? Like, is that possible?
yeah, so I was observing my colleague and who did not receive such comments, and then I realized that yeah, after
Guy
the
or
workshop,
girl?
girl,
Okay.
yeah.
Why?
So
Okay.
after that's why I was saying after the workshop with Martha, I realized that it was about that whole giving up of power in a way in terms
Mm.
of femininity and masculinity.
Mm.
So because if as a woman if you're masculine all the time, people will feel like there is a bit of disparity.
Mm.
And for men, because only men who have a higher amount of femininity, you know, present always, I'm talking about, you know, our stereotypical femininity masculinity thing, right? For
Sure.
so for men, if they are very in touch with the feminine side and that is their more what's the word, they show it most of the time,
Mm.
then they will be more accepting of women who are very masculine.
Mm.
But it's also very damaging for relationships if a woman is constantly masculine and if a
Mm.
man is constantly feminine.
Mm. For sure.
So again, one thing I did learn was that it is you can't be something 100% all the time.
Mm.
It's very damaging to relationships.
Of course.
Yeah. So that's why I want to challenge you, you know, your daughters, you know, shouldn't be finding men who they can defer to. I but that's my opinion, of course. Yeah.
I'll share with you something that triggered from something you said. You said something about surrendering to the either to the process or to the something. In dance, there's a concept for follows to surrender themselves to the process or to it's not so much surrender to the man or surrender to the lead, but in that sense, it's sort of I'm not saying it correctly, but roughly there is this concept where you I've done this before as well, right? As a follow, I follow both girls and guys, okay, and I have favorite people who lead women and men. And the thing that is so hard for me to do is it's
Mm.
certainly hard for men to do, and it's so hard for women in our type A type of women now, okay, who come for dance classes, right? All type A, all in the brain, always thinking what this one doesn't, to surrender to the process of just being there with the other person and just following the lead. Don't argue, don't criticize, don't correct. Of course, most women know the steps better than most men, okay, because women learn faster, they are more in tune with their bodies, and they are more musical in general anyway, right? But to be able to just surrender To surrender to a good lead is very easy because the guy knows everything. You just follow. It's wonderful. And then the women talk about this process of just letting go and just not worrying about stuff, right? To be able to surrender to a beginner lead is very, very difficult because it's quite boring. To be very fair, it's very boring. Unless as a follow. So I always ask advanced follows this, right? How do you dance? Is it quite boring dancing with me or dancing with beginner lead? They're like, no, because I entertain myself. I'm doing my own thing. I'm following completely, but also just enjoying it for every possible moment there is, right? I have a really good moment to describe. I'll describe it later, right? Maybe I just squeeze it in really quickly. Okay, this is Brenda, who's one of the top dancers in the world in Brazilian Zouk. Okay, and she taught a workshop. This is my first workshop ever, first class ever in Brazilian Zouk. So I'm of course terrible now, right? And I dare not ask her to dance because everybody else in the workshop is pretty good. And she's obviously, in my mind, happier to dance with the better classmates of mine than me. Right? So at the very end, I asked her to dance, and we only have half a song because I started half a song in and I didn't dare ask for a second song. Okay, that's how terrible it is. But halfway through the song, I looked up at her face and she was dancing with me, right? And she had this face of complete bliss, okay? Just like as if I look at it as if I was the best beginner she has ever danced with in her entire life. Okay, out of the 10,000 beginners she's taught, I'm the best one ever. I don't kid myself that I'm a good dancer or particularly good looking compared to all the Brazilians. The best one ever, just pure bliss. Right? I was like, wow, this is the gold standard. You know, that she can take a boring beginner's choppy dance and enjoy it, and she really looked like she was enjoying it. So of course, I go on this addictive search for this look, right? This bliss, right? And when I asked Natalia Pinero, she's another instructor. Okay, I said, look, do you surrender, and how do you surrender to beginner dancers? Is it boring? She's like, yeah, all of that. And most instructors, especially, and most women who dance and want to surrender and follow, they will have a few caveats. Okay, one is sexual inappropriateness. If the guy harasses you, you're allowed to stop the dance. That's very appropriate etiquette. If it's dangerous or painful, that means the guy dip you too far, or he twists your arm, you're allowed to either stiffen up and resist, or you can actually go so far as to tell him, actually, this one hurts my arm, please don't do this, right? So I said, okay, you surrender, but with these few exceptions that everybody else has, right?
Yep.
And she said no. And this was very surprising to me. I'm like, if he's hurting you, you're not going to stop? He says, no. If the guy presses too hard or dips me too far, I will surrender even more. I'm like, how does that work? I'm like, what?
Yeah, it sounds so counterintuitive.
Yeah. Sounds so counterintuitive, but she says, so I was like, what's going on? And so she said, the more I surrender, the more the guy knows it's his responsibility. Now, if he drops me, it's his fault. So I give him full control. Even though the thing is going out of control, I give him full control. I think the caveat, which was not stated, is that she's a very good dancer herself. Okay, so she knows her own limits, and B, she can probably dip further than he is prepared to dip her . Okay, so to be very fair, she's technically very strong, right? But I was like, if the beginner don't really know, it's like, never mind, let him do it. Let him fumble it, right? He dropped me once, he won't drop me again. I'm like, what? You know what I mean? Like, you know? So I think that's a bit extreme for me, right? Like, I wouldn't go that far. If I don't teach dance, but if I were to teach dance, I don't think I would ever impose that on anyone, on any female student, that if the thing is painful, you surrender more. I think that's a bit of a stretch. But it's interesting that she does it, you know, that someone who's good and experienced. So it's not a newbie trying out new things. That's her philosophy. So that's an extreme case, I think.
But she did bring out a very good point that sometimes certain people need to fail first. Then they learn from their mistakes. Then they learn their boundaries as well. Because if it's a bit like tough love, right? I'm sure you do this with your children sometimes. Like, you know, they are going to make a mistake. You know that they are going to be upset about it, but you willingly let them fail within your own safety net, in that sense. But you want them to fail so that they they know their boundaries, they know where to succeed, where they can improve on.
Yeah. The thing is that the gray area is very large. So for example, finishing someone's sentence, right? Now generally, of course, we know we're not supposed to do that, but we still do it anyway. And that is, don't say let someone fail. The person wasn't really going to fail with your sentence. He's just going to go a different way, or you just wanted to, or let's say like giving someone directions when they drive, right? It's like, it's okay if someone goes the other way. It may not be the fastest, but it's okay. But yet we always feel we want to like over optimize, over control. Our way is better because actually it is, but actually it's not. Right?
Yeah, talk about backseat drivers. No.
Yeah, right. So business is very hard as well. Business, always we feel that our way is better or we are more efficient. The problem is if it's not actually better, then it's just a very clear mistake, right? We've made a very clear mistake. I was like, you want to say something, but actually don't know what you're talking about. Now, that one's a mistake, better learn. But the problem is if we are actually better, then how to gently let the other person learn it without shoving it down their face that, hey, hello, yours is wrong, okay? So that part is actually very difficult.
Yeah, I don't think that there is a fixed answer because a lot of things are situational, and it's definitely not easy when it comes to interpersonal relationships. So yeah, people are difficult. We have our minds of our own, different opinions. But I think what you're doing with your podcast is great because you are constantly questioning, getting to know people, getting to know different points of views, and finding what actually works for you. Which is something like what I'm doing with my Melissa's Tabletop Talk as well, because although I don't call it the intimate moment, but in a sense, I interview people so that they share what they have learned. They share what they want to spread to the world, and they are all useful tips, hints, etc., into how we can be a better version of ourselves, right? Yeah. Let's wrap things up. Where do you see, the intimate moment in the next, say, 2-3 years?
Well, I'll tell you what I didn't see was coming on your show. This is a wonderful surprise and a wonderful privilege, right? Obviously, it spreads this way as well. No, I mean, I'd love to see it grow. I don't really want to put a number on it, but 300-400 will be nice in the next couple of years.
As in 300-400 interviews.
Yeah, I think so.
You can hit that for sure.
Yeah, for sure. So I've been doing individual ones, like the one we did, which is nice. I've been doing group ones, and those actually can scale quite large, I feel. The birthday one, which you came to, the Mother's and Father's Day, I think were 30 plus people. And that's just a good way of scaling. The overall intention must be and is to spread what I have been privileged to learn and to share that with others, and then everyone gets more connected now.
Okay. Thank you so much for your time, Yian. And yes, tell us, how can we connect better with you? Where can we find your podcast?
So I'm in the process of migrating it to a proper website. It's right now on my Facebook page, which is quite low tech. Sorry, it's Yian Huang. I think it's Yian.Huang.7 on Facebook. And everything's on my front page right now. Okay,
cool. We look forward to it. And yeah, maybe we can talk after this about how we can help spread your podcast and Melissa's Tabletop Talk too.
There we go.
All right. Thank you so much. And we'll stay tuned for the next episode too. Bye, guys.
Thank you.